The veil slipped from her fingers just as the church doors slammed shut. A gust of spring wind caught the delicate fabric and sent it tumbling across the gravel. But she didn't chase it. She just stood there, frozen, one hand resting on the curve of her pregnant belly, the other clutching a small bouquet of wilting lilies. Her dress, ivory, simple, borrowed, didn't hide the life she carried. And maybe that was the point. She had come in truth, not disguise, and still they had cast her out. "You need to leave," one of the churchwomen had said, face drawn tight with polite horror. "This is a house of God. We can't host this." The word hadn't needed finishing, not when half the congregation had turned to stare, lips pursed, eyes narrowing with small-town righteousness. She had made it 5 steps inside before a deacon intercepted her, arms crossed. Then the whispers began. The dress, the bump, the ring missing from her finger. That wasn't a bride, they'd decided. That was trouble in Toul. The pastor hadn't even spoken, just stood frozen behind the pulpit, brows furrowed, eyes searching her face like a man trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. She'd opened her mouth to explain, to say that the groom had vanished that morning, to beg for time or guidance or even a prayer, but the door had already begun to close. "Please," she had whispered, barely audible over the rustle of hymnals and murmuring disapproval. "I don't need a ceremony. I just need to sit, to breathe." But it hadn't mattered. Not to them. She had been dismissed with a kindness so sharp it left a wound. And now she stood on the steps, alone, watching her veil settle into the church's rose bushes like a symbol of everything lost. Her name was Callie. She was 25. And in a few weeks she would be a mother. She hadn't planned on coming here today. The dress had been a last-minute decision, pulled from a consignment shop rack 3 towns over. The bouquet had cost $5. Her shoes were flats, scuffed at the toes. There was no one waiting inside now. No groom, no family. Just her, and the child she carried, who had kicked once, hard, as if to remind her she wasn't entirely alone. A woman passing on the sidewalk paused, staring. "Shame," she muttered, not quietly. Callie turned her face away, her cheeks burning. She didn't cry, not yet, not while they were still watching. But something inside her shifted. Not broke. No, not this time, just changed. Hardened, maybe, strengthened. She bent down slowly, picked up the bouquet, and dusted off the dirt. A thorn snagged her thumb. She didn't flinch. She walked back to the car, a dented hatchback parked under the dogwood tree across the lot. Every step felt like a funeral march. She didn't look back. Not at the stained glass windows, not at the steeple, not at the man who had finally stepped out the church doors and was watching her from a distance with an unreadable expression. The pastor. He didn't call out, didn't move, just watched. She reached the car, unlocked the door, and sat behind the wheel. Her hands trembled as she gripped it, not from fear, from fury, from grief, from a deep, bone-deep ache that the one place she thought might offer sanctuary had offered nothing but shame. She rested her head against the steering wheel and whispered, "I just needed a place to belong. Just one day. Just one." A soft tap on the window made her jump. She looked up, startled. It was him. The pastor. Older than she remembered, though she hadn't seen him in over a decade, but the eyes were the same. Piercing. Kind, once. He didn't smile. He didn't offer apology. He simply said, through the cracked window, "What did you say your name was?" Callie stared at him, confused. "You didn't ask." "I'm asking now." "Callie," she said, almost daring him to recognize it. "Callie Brighton," The color drained from his face. His mouth parted slightly. He stepped back, hand dropping from the window frame. "Wait here," he murmured. And before she could ask anything else, he turned and walked briskly back toward the church, leaving her staring after him, confused, exhausted, and suddenly uncertain of everything she thought she understood about this place. Because the look on his face hadn't been judgment. It had been something closer to recognition. Or regret. Reverend Matthew Granger shut the heavy oak door behind him and leaned against it as if the air outside had knocked the wind clean out of him. Callie Brighton. That name hadn't been spoken in this church in 13 years. And yet there she was, on the front steps, wearing a tattered bridal gown and carrying more than just a child in her belly. She carried history. His heart thundered as he stepped into his study and pulled the drawer that stuck slightly on the left. Inside, nestled among faded bulletins and a broken baptismal necklace, was a folder. Yellowed, thick. He hadn't touched it in years, not since the day her mother left town without warning. Inside were copies of letters, one from her mother, addressed to him, written in ink that had bled from tears. Another from a judge, sealed family court records. Callie Brighton was the daughter of his late brother, David, a niece he'd never met. And now, somehow, she had returned, carrying a child and dressed for a wedding that would never be. He dropped into the leather chair that creaked under his weight. His mind raced. Why hadn't he recognized her? He hadn't seen her since she was 11, when David died in a car wreck on the interstate, and her mother left the next day, swearing she'd never set foot near the Grangers again. "Your family doesn't deserve to claim her," she'd said through gritted teeth at the funeral. "You turned your back on David. You don't get to turn her into some charity case now." And just like that, Callie vanished from the county until today. Until that name, wrapped in breath and sorrow, cracked the ice of time and memory. Outside, Callie sat in the car, knuckles white on the steering wheel, debating whether to drive away or go back and set fire to the sanctuary that rejected her. She hadn't expected kindness, but she hadn't expected cruelty either, not from a place her father once called holy ground. Her fingers brushed the locket around her neck. Inside it, a photo of her as a baby, cradled by a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile. Her father, David Granger. She didn't even know if this church still remembered him, or cared. All she knew was that when her fiancé vanished, after promising vows and futures and nursery paint colors, she had nowhere else to go. She'd followed the one clue her mother ever gave. "Your father's family runs a church in Fairview. If you're ever in trouble, go there. They owe you more than I can say." And now, the very church that bore the Granger name had slammed its doors in her face. Her stomach turned. Jacob, her son, kicked again. Hard. She whispered to him, "It's okay, baby. I won't let them do to you what they did to me." Just then, the church door creaked open again. The pastor stepped out, no longer stiff or uncertain. He walked quickly, as if chasing time itself. Callie tensed as he approached. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak. "You shouldn't have been turned away. That wasn't how this place is meant to be." She raised a brow. "Isn't it?" He crouched beside the open car window, hands clasped together. "I didn't recognize you at first. Callie Brighton. Your father." "Was David," she said. "My mom told me. She never told me about any of you." "We tried," he said quietly. "After he died, we tried to reach her. She refused, said we didn't deserve you." Callie's jaw tightened. "So you forgot me?" "No," he said, voice low. "I never forgot. But I didn't expect to see you again. And certainly not like this." She bit her lip, unsure if she wanted his apology or his silence more. "Why were they so quick to throw me out?" "Small towns," he said. "They believe sin shows up in obvious ways, and sometimes they forget grace is supposed to show up first." She stared at him. "Are you saying you want me to come back in?" "So they can look at me like I'm trash again?" He shook his head. "I'm saying, come back so they can see who you are. Because if they knew the truth, if they knew whose blood runs in your veins, they'd realize they should have welcomed you from the start." Her breath hitched. "Why would that matter? My father's dead." "But you're not," he said. "And maybe your return is exactly what this place needs to remember what compassion looks like." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't drive away either. After a moment, she reached for her bouquet and stepped out of the car. She stood taller than before. Still pregnant, still abandoned, but no longer invisible. And as she followed him back toward the church doors, she wondered what they would say when they learned the bride they had scorned was the daughter of the church's own blood. The wooden doors creaked open again, and the shift in the sanctuary's air was nearly audible. Conversations halted. Heads turned. The woman they'd cast out, pregnant, barefoot in her flats, veil gone, lilies wilting in hand, was walking back in, led not by shame, but by the pastor himself. Reverend Granger didn't look left or right as he guided her down the aisle, but Callie could feel the tension ripple in every pew they passed. Some people averted their eyes. Others stared, sharp and quiet. She caught bits of murmured judgment. "Still has the nerve. That poor child. I heard she's not even from here. Who let her back in?" The whispers wrapped around her like ivy, tight and choking. But she kept walking, one slow breath at a time. Not for them, for herself, and for the child she carried who deserved to see their mother stand tall. They stopped at the altar, the very spot where her father once stood as a teenager in the youth choir, where her parents were married before life ripped them apart, and where now Reverend Granger turned to face the congregation and said words that struck through silence like lightning. "This is Callie Brighton." A pause. Gasps. One woman clutched her pearls. A man dropped his Bible with a dull thud. "You remember David Brighton?" he continued. "My brother, gone too soon. Callie is his daughter." The sanctuary stirred. No one spoke. "Years ago," the pastor said, voice steady but thick with memory, "David married a girl from 3 counties over. They had Callie, and for reasons I will never claim to fully understand, her mother disappeared with her after the funeral. We tried to stay in touch, but she didn't want our name, didn't want our faith. So we waited. And now?" He turned slightly, eyes on Callie. "She's come home." The weight of that word hit her hard. Home. Could it be? Could this ever be a home again? "And yes," the pastor added, eyes sweeping the crowd, "she is with child. And no, she's not married. But let me ask you this. What would our Savior have done? Would he have turned her away at the door?" A few heads lowered. A woman in the 3rd row dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. "We cannot call ourselves a church if we only extend grace when it's convenient," he said. "This woman is family, my family, and from this day forward this sanctuary will treat her as such." He placed a hand on Callie's shoulder. "She deserves your prayers, not your punishment." Silence held for a breath too long. Then a voice from the back, Eunice Leary, 92 and blind in one eye, stood. "Her daddy sang at my husband's funeral. And if she's half the soul we ought to be baking casseroles, not casting stones." A murmur of agreement. A few nods. The tide turned, slow but undeniable. Callie didn't speak. She couldn't trust her voice not to crack. but she met their eyes, every one of them who dared look, and didn't blink. After the service, people approached. Not many, but enough. One woman offered to bring baby clothes. A man pressed a $20 bill into her hand without speaking. A teenager, trembling, asked to hug her. Callie said yes. She said yes to all of it. To the slow unraveling of the wall she'd built. To the possibility of not being alone anymore. Back in the study, she sat with Reverend Granger, still in her dress, sipping the lukewarm coffee he offered. "I didn't come here for charity," she said. "I came because I had nowhere else to go." He nodded. Sometimes that's where God does his best work. She gave a short laugh. "I'm not sure he even remembers my name." "Then maybe it's time you heard it again," he said, and pulled from the drawer a dusty Bible with her father's handwriting in the front cover. Inside, tucked behind the page of Psalms, was a note dated 1997. "If anything ever happens to me, please take care of Callie. She deserves better than the silence I came from." Her hand trembled as she read it. He wrote this? The week before he died. Why didn't anyone show this to me? We didn't know where you were, and maybe I wasn't ready to face the fact that I failed him. She looked up, eyes wet but steady. "I don't know what this place is supposed to mean to me anymore." "Then let's figure it out together," he said. And this time, she didn't flinch when he offered his hand. Callie sat at the edge of the worn couch in Reverend Granger's study, still clutching the note her father had written almost 3 decades ago. Her fingers traced the faded ink, as though the curves of the letters might give her answers he never got the chance to speak. The silence stretched between them, warm but uncertain. Reverend Granger finally broke it. "I know this isn't what you came for," he said, his voice gentler now, like he wasn't speaking as a pastor anymore, but as a man who had missed too many years. "But you said you didn't have anywhere else to go. That's not going to be the case anymore." Callie raised her eyes, guarded. "What does that mean?" He hesitated for a beat. "It means I want you to stay. Here, in Fairview. I have the old parsonage behind the church. It's small, but livable. It's been sitting empty since we moved into the new house. Needs a little work. But it's yours if you want it, rent-free, for as long as you need." She blinked. Once. Twice. "You're offering me a house?" "A place to land," he said. "Not charity. Family." The word echoed again. Family. And this time it didn't sound like a wound. It sounded like hope. But hope came with fear, and she felt it rising in her chest, curling around her ribs like panic. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "I could be lying. I could be anyone." He gave a half smile. "You could be, but you're not. You're Callie. You're David's daughter. And I watched the way you stood there today, holding your head up even when the room turned cold. That kind of strength doesn't come from nowhere." Her throat tightened. "And what about them?" she asked, gesturing toward the church walls. "The whispers aren't going away overnight." "No, they won't," he admitted, "but neither will you." It was too much. The tears came fast, hot and sharp. She covered her face with both hands and let herself cry, not because she was weak, but because for the first time in years someone was handing her more than judgment. They were offering dignity, shelter, a beginning. "Thank you," she said through the tears. "I don't know how to accept this without feeling like I'm waiting for it to be taken away." "Then don't accept it yet," he said. "Just try it. One night, one day at a time." That evening, Callie followed him across the gravel lot to the parsonage. It was small, whitewashed, with ivy curling around the porch rails and a creaky screen door that had long since lost its spring. The inside smelled like thyme and dust and forgotten coffee filters. But it had windows, a stove, a tiny bedroom. It felt like something that could be made into a home. She opened the nursery door. Faded wallpaper. A rocking chair in the corner, paint chipped and cushion flattened with age. She stood in the doorway for a long time before turning to him. "Someone lived here." "My daughter," he said quietly, "before she left for college, before everything changed." "You had a daughter?" "Still do. She just doesn't come around much anymore. Life pulled her away like it does." He didn't explain further, and she didn't ask. Pain recognized pain, even in silence. That night, Callie curled up on the twin bed with her hands on her belly and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally claimed her. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was safe. The next morning, a knock came. This time it was a friendly one. A woman stood on the porch with a casserole in one hand and a box of gently used baby clothes in the other. "I was in the pew," she said. "I judged you too quick. That was wrong, and, well, we all need a second chance sometimes." Callie accepted the gift, stunned. "Thank you." "We're not all like Eunice," the woman added with a wink, "but she's a good one to follow." As the woman walked away, Callie realized something else had arrived on that porch. Not just food or onesies, but the first small crack in the wall between her and the town. Reverend Granger stepped onto the porch a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Looks like you've got neighbors now." "Looks like I've got more than that," she said. He smiled. "Let's see what we can build here." Callie took the mug and held it to her lips. The warmth spread slowly, like dawn breaking. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't end in heartbreak. Callie hadn't spoken his name in weeks, not since the morning he vanished and left her standing in her mother's borrowed dress, holding a bouquet of hope and trembling. That day had redefined what silence could do. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a betrayal loud enough to split her world. His name was Eric Nolan, 33, accountant, neatly parted hair, a nervous laugh she used to find endearing. He had kissed her belly when they found out she was pregnant and swore he'd never leave her to raise a child alone. But somewhere between the promise and the wedding day, he'd changed. Or maybe she had never really known him. Sitting on the parsonage porch with Reverend Granger's coffee warming her palms, Callie couldn't stop wondering what the letter would have said. There wasn't one. Just silence. No calls, no texts, no car in the driveway. She hadn't had the energy to chase him, or the pride. "He ghosted you the morning of your wedding?" Granger asked, his brow furrowed. She nodded. "Took off before dawn. I thought he was getting breakfast. Turns out he'd packed the night before." "And left you with a baby and a borrowed dress," the pastor said with quiet disgust. "Left me with more than that," she said. "He left me with shame, with the looks I got from the florist when I picked up the bouquet anyway, from the motel clerk when I returned the room key alone, from the church when I tried to step inside." Granger didn't respond. He didn't need to. His silence was the kind that stood beside you instead of turning away. "I'm sorry," he said after a while. "Not just for what they did, for what I didn't do fast enough." She shook her head. "You did enough. More than enough." He took a breath, hesitated. "What if he comes back?" Callie's grip on the mug tightened. "Then I won't be the girl who waited in the motel room with wet eyes and a shaky voice. I'll be the woman who has a place to live, a child to raise, and nothing left to prove to him." "That's strength," he said. "No," she replied. "That's survival." Later that day, while sorting through a box of nursery donations from the church ladies, She found something unexpected. An unopened envelope tucked beneath a stack of baby blankets. No name on the front, just a blank, sealed letter. Inside was a note written in rushed handwriting that stopped her breath. Callie. I don't deserve to write this. I panicked. I couldn't breathe thinking about the weight of it all. You, the baby, the vows. I failed you. I know that. I told myself it was to protect you from a man who couldn't be enough. But really, I ran because I was afraid I wasn't man enough to try. I'm sorry. I'll always be sorry. Eric. She sat down hard on the edge of the bed, letter trembling in her lap. Her first instinct was fury, her second was disbelief, and her third, unexpected, unwanted, was heartbreak all over again. But this time, she didn't let it bury her. She folded the note slowly, carefully, and placed it in the drawer of the nightstand. Not as a keepsake, as a record, a page in the book of her survival. That night, she asked Reverend Granger, "Would you let him back into your life if you were me?" He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Only if he shows up the way a real man should, willing to stand before what he broke and try to rebuild it. Otherwise, no." She nodded. "Then I hope he never does." "That's fair," he said, "but I'll be here if he does, to remind him what he walked away from." A week passed. Then another. The town's ice continued to melt in strange ways. A knock on her door from a teenager with a box of diapers. A handwritten invitation to a small group gathering at the community center. Someone mowed the parsonage lawn without asking. And slowly, the gossip gave way to curiosity, and curiosity to quiet respect. Callie was no longer just the pregnant girl in the pew. She was becoming something else, something stronger. But deep down, a question still lingered like fog on a warm morning. What would she do if Eric showed up? Not with apologies, but with demands. Or worse, with a legal claim. She didn't know the answer yet. But she knew one thing. She wasn't running anymore. Callie never expected a baby shower. Not here. Not in this town where whispers still clung to her name like dust. But on a soft Sunday afternoon, under the low-hung rafters of the church fellowship hall, she stood barefoot on the old wood floor as folding tables bowed under the weight of casseroles, cupcakes, diapers, and pastel gift bags. It was Eunice Leary's idea. Of course it was. And once the old woman decided something was happening, the rest of the town didn't dare say no. "If we're going to judge," Eunice had declared to the quilting circle, "then we can at least do it while knitting booties." Now, a dozen women surrounded Callie, cooing over onesies and arguing about which brand of wipes wouldn't give a rash. Someone strung up a banner that said, "Welcome, little one," and a girl barely out of high school handed Callie a gift she'd bought with her own tips from waitressing. "I never met my mom," she said softly, eyes cast down. "But I think you're going to be a good one." Callie nearly cried at that. Not because of the gift, though it was a soft yellow blanket that smelled like lavender, but because for the first time in months, someone looked at her with belief, not pity. She was starting to feel something she hadn't dared name. Community. Reverend Granger arrived halfway through. Not in his robes, but in a flannel shirt and jeans, holding a box of hand-carved wooden toys from his late father's workshop. "These were meant for the church nursery," he said, "but I think your little one might need them first." The room softened. Someone played hymns on the old upright piano. There was laughter, too. And for a few golden minutes, it was as if the town had decided to cradle her gently instead of judging her harshly. But Callie couldn't ignore the woman near the punch table, arms crossed, watching her like a hawk guarding its nest. Lydia Nolan, Eric's older sister. Callie had hoped she wouldn't come, hoped she wouldn't remember or care. But Lydia had always been protective. Of Eric, of the family name, of how things looked to outsiders. Callie had barely spoken to her since the wedding, that wasn't. And now, here she was, sipping from a paper cup, eyes narrowed like a ledger being balanced. After the cake was cut and the crowd thinned, Lydia approached. "This is quite the spectacle," she said, her voice even. "It wasn't my idea," Callie replied, matching the calm. "I believe that." Lydia's gaze moved over the room. "You're not the same girl I used to know." "I'm not." "You kept the baby." "I did." A beat passed. Lydia's jaw tightened. "Eric called me, once. Said he left because he didn't think he'd be a good father. Said he hoped you'd understand someday." "I don't," Callie said. "And I don't need to." Lydia nodded slowly, folding her arms tighter. "He's in New Mexico now, working construction. Says he's trying to clean up. But I told him not to come back unless he planned to face you like a man." Callie blinked. "You said that?" "I did." She hesitated, then added, "Because I saw what it did to you." "And I saw what it didn't do to him. That's not justice." For a moment, something like truce shimmered between them. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but understanding. "If he ever does come back," Callie said, "he won't find the same woman he left." "I know," Lydia replied. "That's why I came, to see her for myself." She left quietly, disappearing before Callie could say more. Reverend Granger wandered over, watching Lydia's retreat. "Trouble?" he asked. "Closure," Callie said. "Maybe just a crack, but it's something." The party wound down. The sun began to set in soft peach and lavender tones across the windows. As the last guests trickled out, Callie stood alone for a moment, surrounded by gifts and laughter remnants and the smell of vanilla frosting. She put her hands on her belly and whispered, "They showed up for you today. They saw you, and they saw me. Maybe we're not invisible anymore." The baby kicked in response, strong and sure. She smiled. There was still fear, yes, still questions. But today had been proof that redemption doesn't always come in dramatic moments. It can arrive in the form of warm casseroles, donated pacifiers, and women who learned how to love out loud again. When she stepped outside into the evening light, she saw that someone had tied balloons to the porch of the parsonage. Blue, pink, and gold. No note, no signature. Just color against a weary world. Callie didn't need to know who left them. All she needed was to believe she wasn't standing alone anymore. It started with a cramp. Not sharp, not alarming, just a tightening low in her abdomen that made her pause in the kitchen as she reached for the tea kettle. Callie stood there, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the counter, eyes narrowed. "Not yet," she whispered, half pleading, half commanding. The baby wasn't due for 3 more weeks, but her body didn't seem to care about the calendar. The cramps came again, stronger this time, wrapping around her like a belt being pulled tighter with every breath. She tried to dismiss it. Braxton Hicks, probably. Just nerves. She had done too much the day before, unpacking the last of the baby clothes, writing thank you cards to the women from the shower, scrubbing the nursery windows until her back ached. But by noon, the pain came in waves. Predictable, consistent, undeniable. Labor. Early. Alone. She called Reverend Granger, trying to sound calm. I think the baby's coming." He didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." The next 30 minutes were a blur of tension. The hospital bag wasn't ready. Her car keys had disappeared under the couch. Her breathing felt all wrong. The baby seemed to shift lower with every step she took, as if eager to arrive before she could even wrap her mind around it. By the time Granger pulled up in his truck, she was hunched on the porch, gripping the railing, trying not to scream. "You're early," he said, gently guiding her into the passenger seat. "So's this baby," she panted. "Guess they take after me." The drive was bumpy, the contractions unforgiving. Granger kept his hand near the wheel, but his voice steady, talking her through each wave, reminding her to breathe, that she wasn't alone, that she was strong. At the hospital, nurses rushed to admit her. Paperwork blurred in her vision. She heard someone say, "Preterm," another say, "Monitor closely." She clutched Granger's hand until they pried it away. "She's dilated. It's happening fast." The delivery room was sterile, bright, and far too cold. Callie shivered, not from the air, but from fear. She hadn't prepared for early labor. She hadn't prepared to do this without a partner beside her. She hadn't prepared for the loneliness to hit so hard in a room full of professionals. But then a nurse whispered, "You've got this, Mama." And her words cut through the fog. Callie focused, breathed, pushed, screamed. For 2 exhausting, terrifying hours, she gave everything she had to bring this child into the world. And then, like a miracle wrapped in sweat and sobs, it was over. A sharp cry filled the room. Her baby. Her baby. The doctor held up the squirming, red-faced newborn, still slick with life, and said, "It's a girl." Callie's heart broke open. They laid the baby on her chest, skin to skin, and for a long moment, nothing else existed. No Eric, no wedding, no shame, just her daughter, just the fierce, aching love that flooded her chest and left her gasping. "Hi," she whispered, tears soaking her cheeks. "Hi, my little miracle." She named her Lily Hope. Hope for what had been lost. Lily for the bouquet she'd carried the day her world fell apart. When Granger was allowed in, he stood in the doorway, eyes damp, face unreadable. "She's perfect," he said. "So are you." "I didn't know it could feel like this," Callie said. "This hole." "That's what happens," he said, "when you walk through fire and don't come out bitter." She laughed softly, cradling her daughter. "I came out scared." "We all do," he replied, "but you also came out stronger." Later, when the nurses wheeled in a small bassinet and brought her dinner on a tray she could barely touch, she noticed something else. A letter. Slipped into the room like a shadow. The envelope was sealed. Her name written in neat, familiar penmanship. Her heart sank. It was Eric's handwriting. She didn't open it. Not yet. She wasn't ready to let anything cloud this moment. Not now. Not while her daughter breathed against her chest with the sound of new life. She tucked the envelope under the edge of the hospital tray and turned her face back to Lily. "We're okay," she whispered. "Whatever that letter says, we're going to be okay." Because Callie Brighton, the girl they turned away at the church doors, had just brought someone into the world. And in doing so, she had stitched herself back together in ways no man could undo. Callie waited until nightfall. The hospital room had quieted. Lily finally asleep in the bassinet beside her. The beeping machines softened to a hum beneath the weight of her exhaustion. The envelope sat untouched on the bedside tray, taunting her with a truth she wasn't sure she wanted. But she couldn't ignore it. Not now. She reached for it with hands that had changed, stronger, steadier, the hands of a mother who had just delivered life into the world. She opened it slowly. "Callie, I don't deserve to know anything about your life right now, but I need you to know this. I'm in town. I came back last week. I saw the sign at the church about your baby shower, and it gutted me. I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm not here to pretend I didn't fail you in the worst possible moment. I left because I was a coward. I ran from a life I wasn't sure I could handle, but the truth is, I've thought about you every day since. I want to see you, even just once. I understand if the answer is no. I'll be at the old train station bench every evening at 6 for the next 3 days. After that, I'll leave. No pressure, no expectations, just the hope that maybe you'll let me say in person what I should have said on our wedding day. Eric. She read it 3 times. Her heart stayed strangely still, not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain no longer owned her. It was a letter from a man she used to love, from the father of her child. But it wasn't a key to her past anymore. She was living forward now. She didn't respond. Not yet. The next evening, as Reverend Granger came by to check on her, she handed him the letter without a word. He read it quietly, then handed it back. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to scream at him. Another part wants him to see Lily just once." "Not for him," Granger said gently. "But for her?" Callie looked over at the baby in the bassinet, curled like a question mark, cheeks flushed with sleep. "I don't want her to grow up wondering." "Then go," he said, "but only if it's your choice, not because you owe him anything." The next day, she dressed slowly, cautiously, unsure of her own resolve. Lily stayed with the nurse while she stepped out alone, coat wrapped tightly around her and the wind biting through her uncertainty. The train station sat on the edge of town, weathered, quiet, a place where goodbyes always seemed louder than arrivals. And there he was, sitting on the bench just like he said. His hair was longer, a bit unruly, his face more hollow. He looked up and saw her, and stood immediately, hands trembling, as if she might vanish if he blinked. "Callie," he breathed. "You came." "I did." She stood a few feet away. "But I'm not sure why yet." He nodded, swallowing hard. I don't expect anything. I just needed you to see me, to know I'm not the same man who left." "You look the same," she said flatly. "Still standing, still wearing your coat. You didn't have to walk into that church alone or carry a child while strangers sneered at you." He flinched. "I deserve that." "You deserve more," she said, "but not from me." He blinked rapidly. "I don't know what I thought this would be. Maybe some kind of closure. Maybe a glimpse." He hesitated. "Of her." Callie stiffened. "She's not yours to claim." "I know," he whispered. "But could I just know her name?" Her jaw clenched. Lily. Lily Hope. The name landed between them like a bridge with no floor. "That's beautiful," he said. "Is she okay?" "She's perfect." "You're raising her alone?" "No," she said. "I'm raising her surrounded by people who didn't run." That stung. He looked down. "I'm not asking to be in her life. I just wanted to look you in the eye and say, I'm sorry. Not in a letter, not in a voicemail. I needed you to hear it." She studied him. Broken. Human. Not a monster, just a man who failed. She took a breath. "Then hear this too. I forgive you. But that doesn't mean I trust you. And it doesn't mean she will ever know your face unless she asks to." He nodded, tears rising. "Thank you." "Goodbye, Eric." And with that she turned and walked away. Not because she was cold, but because she had somewhere warmer to return to. A daughter, a home, a life she'd built from the wreckage. The church bulletin was always the same. Folded paper, plain font, ink that smudged if your hands were too warm. Callie had stopped glancing at it weeks ago, but that Sunday morning, something tugged at her as Reverend Granger handed one to her personally, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Lily slept in her arms, wrapped in a soft yellow blanket, cheeks rosy from the breeze that had nipped at them on the walkover. Callie took the bulletin, half listening to the murmurs of the congregation settling in around her, until she caught sight of her own name on the back page. Not just hers, Lily Hope Brighton. There it was, in bold. under the New Arrivals section, next to a note that read, "May she be raised in love, strength, and a community that sees the good in every beginning." Her throat tightened. No title. No daughter of Callie and Eric. No speculation. Just her daughter. Fully hers. Fully seen. Fully welcome. She looked up sharply, eyes scanning the pews, searching for a whisper of judgment or disapproval, but found none. Instead, an elderly woman in the third row gave her a warm nod. A young father across the aisle smiled, bouncing his own toddler. Someone had left a bouquet of wildflowers on the pew where Callie usually sat. For the first time, she didn't feel like a visitor in God's house. She felt like family. After the service, a few women approached, not with pity, but with casseroles and questions about diaper brands and pediatricians. One offered to watch Lily during Wednesday Bible study. Another asked if Callie wanted to help with the children's corner once she was ready. Reverend Granger caught her in the hallway before she left. "You saw the bulletin?" She nodded, eyes wet. "I didn't expect to be named." "You deserved to be." "You didn't ask me?" "Didn't need to. You've earned your place here 100 times over." She looked down at Lily's tiny face, so calm, so unaware of how much the world had changed around her. "I used to think being a good mother meant hiding the hard parts. But maybe it means showing up through them, letting people see the mess, not just the miracle." Granger nodded. "Church isn't for perfect people. It's for people who keep choosing to stay." She smiled. "Then I think I finally found the right pew." That evening, after Lily had been fed and swaddled, and the sun began to dip low behind the trees outside their little parsonage room, Callie sat down to write her own note. Not to Eric, not to anyone in particular, just words she needed to release. "Dear Lily, today your name was printed in the church bulletin. It doesn't seem like much, but to me, it was everything. It meant you belong. We belong. You are not a mistake. You are not a burden. You are not the symbol of a wedding that never happened. You are the proof that love is still possible, even when it looks different than we imagined. I was afraid the world would close its doors on you the way it tried to close them on me. But doors don't matter when you learn how to build windows. And today, we opened a few." She folded the letter, tucked it into a small box labeled, "For Lily, someday," and placed it beside a growing stack. Hospital wristband, first ultrasound, shower invitation, now this. A record of what it took to become them. Before bed, she took Lily into her arms and held her a little tighter. "Someday," she whispered, "you'll ask why he left. And I'll tell you what matters more. Why we stayed." As the wind picked up outside and the stars came out, Callie Brighton finally felt the stillness she had been chasing for months. Not the kind that follows silence, but the kind that follows peace. The kind that comes when you realize your story didn't end where it broke. It only began. Callie didn't expect it to happen there, on the worn carpet between pews, beneath a stained glass window casting soft blues and golds on the floor. But sometimes, life chooses its own moments for joy. Lily had just turned 1. The town had gathered after service for cupcakes and lemonade, and someone had made a little paper crown that slipped down over her eyes every few minutes. She was toddling along the side of the pew, fingers gripping the wood, giggling as if she knew she was building up to something. Callie crouched a few feet away, arms open, not coaxing, not begging, just waiting. Lily paused, blinked up at her mother, and then, with the kind of courage only children carry, she let go. 1 foot forward, then another. Wobbly, brave, miraculous. And suddenly, Lily was in Callie's arms. The room erupted in soft gasps and laughter and a round of spontaneous applause. "She picked the right aisle," Reverend Granger said from behind, mist in his eyes. "She walked straight toward Grace." Callie laughed through tears, not just because Lily had walked, but because she had chosen her. She had walked to the woman who had once stood alone on a church doorstep, belly round, pride shattered, heart aching. That woman was gone now. In her place stood a mother who had built a life with no blueprint, no guarantees, just faith stitched together from casseroles, kindness, and the hard-earned belief that she was enough. After the party, after Lily had crashed in her crib with frosting on her cheeks, Callie stood in the doorway of the church sanctuary and stared down the aisle. A year ago, she had walked, away from it, head bowed, cheeks burning, the weight of rejection pressing on her spine. Now she walked it again, slowly, barefoot, tracing the steps of her daughter. No veil, no bouquet, just strength. At the altar she didn't pray. She stood. Because sometimes, standing was prayer enough. She placed a small note on the pulpit, folded in thirds. It wasn't addressed to anyone, but the words were clear. Thank you for not locking the door twice. That night, as twilight fell over the parsonage, Callie sat on the porch with Lily asleep against her chest. The stars came out one by one, quiet and faithful. She thought about Eric sometimes, not with longing or regret, but with a kind of quiet release. He had given her a child, and then life had given her everything else. She reached into the small box of Lily's keepsakes and added something new. The bulletin from the day of her first steps, signed in the corner by every woman who'd witnessed them. One wrote, "She's going to move mountains." Another, "She's already moved us." Callie smiled, knowing that her daughter wouldn't remember that day. But she would. Forever. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted stories on General Common Tales. If you'd seen her take those first steps, would your heart have stayed whole, or would it have melted too? Tell us in the comments.